We've talked in so many ways about the need to engage the voices of regular citizens and the efforts of regular citizens, and I think there's been a lot of frustration expressed through some of the questions about how can we amplify those voices, how can we communicate those voices to our elected officials and to the public as a whole. And I think we're going to hear some good ideas on those questions in the next discussion about social media and the ways that we can use those tools in these efforts. So let's take a little bit of a look at a clip from the film about social media.
I get letters every day from people who have read something on the internet that they take as gospel. They've done nothing to check it out. They've done nothing to reality test what they're hearing. They just get something on the internet that says some far out, crazy, wacko thing, and then they send you a letter as though this were gospel because it was on the internet. You know, I mean, people have got to be a little more skeptical.
The internet has opened a gateway to a never-ending flood of information. It's also made the distribution of that information expand beyond traditional news sources. Websites with an agenda and strong opinions are often built and presented in a way to look similar to a traditional news website, mimicking their style and appearance. This can give some users the impression that these opinion websites are traditional news websites, but the content is much different, biased and based on opinion rather than fact. That bias is amplified on some social media groups. The swapping of information is easy and immediate. Social media groups sometimes bring out raw and often offensive commentary. While social media proves to be a popular way to trade information, it also poses dangers in forming public opinion. There are no rules for fact-checking or sourcing information. Anything goes. Anyone can say anything and connect with others who feel the same way. Combined, opinions that pass as fact can spread almost instantly and can change the course of public debate.
First, please welcome our moderator, Nathan Daschle. Nathan is the founder and CEO of Ruckus, that is ruck.us, and Ruckus is a political engagement platform that allows members to find like-minded people, share ideas, and take collective action. The panel can take the stage, please. Welcome, please, also, Kahlil Byrd. Kahlil Byrd is CEO of Americans Elect, which is an organization promoting an online effort to nominate a presidential candidate on the 2012 election ballot by using the internet and avoiding traditional and partisan primary system. We also want to welcome Michael Bassik. Michael is with U.S. Digital Practice Chair at Burson-Marsteller, which is a global public relations and communications firm. Michael has advised the Democratic National Committee, John Kerry for president, Hillary Clinton for president, and Obama for America. And finally, please welcome Andrew Rasiej. Andrew is an entrepreneur and technology strategist, founded Personal Democracy Forum. That is an international cross-partisan conference series that examines and analyzes how technology is impacting the evolving global political landscape. So let's give a warm welcome to our social media panel.
Thanks so much for that invitation, and thanks all of you for coming today. It's great to see so many faces of interested people here in the audience, a lot of friendly faces, a lot of people meeting for the first time, but there's clearly an energy around the issues that we're discussing, and I'm glad to see that it's shared by so many people. The panel that we're about to launch is titled The Power of Political Social Media, and power is a really interesting word because social media can go in many different ways. And what I want to talk about with this incredible panel is a little bit about the environment that we're in, about how technology has helped create this, and about where we're going. Any panel that talks about, or a conference like we're doing today that talks about reforms, making politics better, has got to start with a problem. And the problem, as I see it, quite simply, is that Americans hate politics. I mean, we really, really hate politics. And I know it to be true because everyone I know who's not in politics hates politics. All of my friends from high school, they hate politics. And politics is, if you think about it, it's a real horrible thing to hate because it's so fundamental to who we are as a country. And we really are a pretty spectacular country when you think about it and you think about our history. So the frustration and the anxiety that we feel about politics is really no small thing. So I was looking at a little bit about how we know that we hate politics, because it's not just something that we feel in our gut, it's something you actually can prove empirically. This country has had more change elections in the last decade than any time in its history. Congress right now is at a low point in popularity ever. That's really saying something, because as long as I've been alive, Congress has been unpopular, but Congress is now more unpopular than it's ever been before. More popular than Congress is war in Iran and Paris Hilton. The only things less popular than Congress are Fidel Castro and Mark Furman, for those of you who remember Mark Furman. That's the only thing that's less popular than Congress. We also have, in what I think is a real striking place, the plurality of people in what is, by all intents and purposes, the world's only two-party democracy. We now have a plurality of Americans who don't want to identify with either party. And for younger voters, that gets up to about 50%. Clearly, part of what's going on is that there's been an expectations shift in the last 10 years. Dan and I were just in a panel earlier today where people were talking about this. You know, and that shift, I think, explains partly what's going on. When I and a lot of us in this panel were kids, we had cartoons Saturday mornings, channels 4, 7, and 9, 8 to 11. That was it. My kids watch cartoons any time of day, 20 different mediums, completely on demand. I used to have an Encyclopedia Britannica on my bookshelf, and that's where I got my information. You know, no one comes knocking on our doors anymore selling encyclopedias. Consumers now expect customization, they expect immediacy. They're not used to people saying, sorry, it doesn't come in that color, or sorry, that option's not available. But how we apply those expectations to politics is something we're still struggling with. Technology, of course, what we could casually call a technological revolution, is interlaced with all of this. In 2010, 73% of Americans went online for their news. That number is going to be higher in 2012. But how has technology created this environment? And what is the solution? And what are the dangers of that? And those are some of the questions that I want to talk about with this panel. Now, they've already been introduced, but let me just spend another second talking to you about what a privilege it is to be sitting here with these three gentlemen. All of them know so much about their space and are doing incredible things. Andrew Rasiej is truly one of the pioneers in this field. He's been doing this for a lot longer than anyone else has. He knows the space inside and out, and I think it's a real opportunity for those of you interested in it to ask him questions about where we've come from, about where we might be going. Michael Bassik knows more about the space than he'll forget more about the space than I'll ever know. That's what I meant to say. Michael is at Burson-Marsteller, and Michael is frequently asked to be an expert on these issues. His advice is sought out by numerous people across the spectrum, and he is clearly one of the leading thinkers on social media and digital technology. And Kahlil Byrd is the head of what is truly one of the most exciting and innovative political experiments that we've ever seen. It's using technology to put a presidential candidate on the ballot outside of party politics. So let me ask our panelists to just start off with about a quick minute about who they are, what they kind of what they see about going on, and then we'll get into some questions, and at the end we'll open up for some audience questions. Let's start with Kahlil.
Well, I start out as a huge admirer of Nathan's, and also very grateful for the platform to be able to talk here at NYU. I have been a person who's a Republican who's worked for all three sides, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, mostly statewide. And I became fascinated by this little idea that was stillborn in 2006, but that found its wing in 2010. And since Americans Elect was launched in 2010, the numbers are actually quite interesting. More than 7,000 people have worked on the project in one of its aspects. more than 2.5 million people have signed petitions to put the organization on the ballot in all 50 states, and we're 2/3 of the way done there. And we've had thousands of volunteers on the ground. And I think why we're here today is to talk about, well, what does that have to do with technology? Americans Elect starts out with a very simple proposition that if you can change the way you nominate in this system, and reduce the cost of someone running, reduce the influence of special interest, and make that the opportunity more direct to the American people, we can actually change the way we govern. So we take something that is fantastical and make it real by connecting two tools. What is fantastical in this environment is that you can actually have bipartisan solutions or nonpartisan solutions in governing. It just doesn't happen anymore, to go to Nathan's point. What Americans Elect does is allow us to imagine a Democrat and Republican running together for president in 2012. And then in 2013 and 14, we have people who have a bipartisan spirit running for office all over the country. We do that by, one, getting on the ballot in all 50 states, which is an enormously complex and expensive effort, and by building AmericansElect.org, which is an opportunity to, for the first time, reimagine the way our 100-year nominating process works, so that the American people can choose the issues, and they can directly choose the candidates that they want to see run for office. And in June of 2012, for the first time, a bipartisan ticket will win at our convention, which will be held online at AmericansElect.org, and will run on equal plane and equal footing with the Democratic and Republican nominees. I'll stop there because we're going to go into the entrails, but what I can say is that as we've built this platform and imagined this, one of the most powerful things that we've experienced are regular people taking it, and candidates taking it, and organizations taking it, and using social media and other technology to amplify what we've done. We can talk about that a little bit later.
Hi, I'm Michael Bassik from Burson-Marsteller. Was anyone else sort of really surprised by that initial video? I think if you had replaced the word social media with the word like pornography or something, it may have seemed more appropriate. He was sort of lambasting social media in a way I haven't heard before.
The internet.
The internet. And I also thought you could have replaced every word he said with bars and restaurants. Like the way he was like, I've been to a bar and I heard people talking. Do you hear what they say in bars? I can't believe it. And every day I'm in a bar, someone comes up to me and tells me something, and they don't fact check things. So I just thought it was really ridiculous to hear a sitting member, an elected official, talk about a medium and lambast a medium like that, especially a medium as powerful as social media and the internet. I just don't think you can generalize that way and say because there are some voices in social media that don't fact check, that therefore we have to question everything that exists on the internet. I think and Andrew's been doing a great job of this, is we need to help the elected officials better understand ways in which to communicate online and understand conversations online. And we also have to create tools that enable citizens to better communicate with their elected officials. I think what we've seen is a lot of the tools that exist today have become co-opted by corporations or have become more difficult and challenging for consumers to use. So I think we look forward to seeing what the presidential candidates do this cycle to create tools that make it easier for them to communicate with the electorate. So with that.
Thank you, Michael. Just a couple of kind of foundation points. We really shouldn't be that surprised that our political system is as distraught and dysfunctional as it is. We've been choking our public education system for 30 or 40 years and haven't been teaching civics in our education system in any kind of strident way. So we've sort of now are harvesting a really poor crop of citizens who actually don't understand how our government works, and we've built a political system that reflects far too much of an influence of money than civic participation. And that brings up my second point, which is that we think about civic participation as something that happens when we go vote, but the reality of it is that's just one part of the landscape of civic participation. Civic participation could mean everything from going to a community board or mentoring in a public school or cleaning up a park on a weekend or participating in a city council hearing in your local town. So there's a lot of the infrastructure that that we've been that's been created in our minds as a myth around the beauty of our democracy actually doesn't exist. And so we're fighting at the margins to try to make it functional, and we're looking at the existing political system and out of frustration, occasionally lobbying efforts to change the equation. And at the same time, the internet has risen and become part of our landscape, and it causes as many problems sometimes as it offers opportunities. But we also have to remember it's a brand new tool. It's only been around for really in a functional way in the United States, ubiquitous way for about 10 years. And we shouldn't be judging it too soon as either a benefit to democracy or a detriment to democracy. So, so I just feel that we have an opportunity to recognize that the internet and social media or whatever new technology is going to come out next year or the year after isn't so much of a reflection of technology as it's more of a reflection of a 21st century human population that is thinking in terms of itself as network oriented as opposed to top down hierarchical in a traditional political sense. So I hope that we can open up the panel to a bunch of questions to investigate that today. Thanks.
So let me ask, I want to set the tone a little bit and just get a grasp of what it is we're talking about first. And let's talk a little bit about the environment. I want to ask Kahlil the first question. Kahlil, is this: you've been working in politics for a long time. What we're experiencing now is in many ways reminiscent of things we've experienced before. I mean, when I said before that people hate politics, that sounds like an old line. It sounds like we've hated politics for a long, long time. Is there something unique about what's going on now? Is this categorically different than the way we've hated politics before? Or in some ways, are we just destined to, do we just have an imperfect system? We're just destined to be frustrated with it?
I think there is a unique moment that's happening right now, and it's based on the politics that emerged between 2004 and before, when the internet was first used by someone like Howard Dean all the way through President Obama's campaign. There has become an expectation amongst communities of people, some of them online, some of them organizers, that they should have the direct ability to influence what a candidate says, does, and a campaign. The counter to that is actually what we experience. The first is the super PAC, which it seems like such an enormous thing, except it's 15 or so guys and women, maybe there's some women in that group, who are giving a lot of money, who are tilting campaigns one way or the other. So as people's expectations about being more directly involved are increasing, and their hope about what's going to be possible when they elect a President Obama or someone else rises, they're being disappointed. And I think there are two low points in the campaign that were very interesting for me. One was my favorite debate question that was asked this year, and that is, if you are president of the become president of the United States, will you be subservient to your husband? Which, that's a great creative question by a journalist, but we've had 15 million questions answered by more than 400,000 delegates at Americans Elect, and they asked about jobs, economy, immigration, and other things. The second thing that was interesting was, in the main caucuses, a caucus system that is just as antiquated as anything we've ever seen and is becoming more foolish as we go forward, they couldn't count the votes because the votes would come from the towns and would end up in the spam folder of the people who were supposed to count the caucuses votes. That's the system that we're living in under. At Americans Elect, people have come, taken this innovation, thought about the idea of having a national online caucus where your vote is as important when you're in New Hampshire as it is in California, which is not the case right now. The idea of being able to directly select the issues, the idea of being able to draft the candidates they want and support them online, offline. all of these powerful things are what people are expecting. I think you point out, Nathan, they get it in every other aspect of their lives. Politics seems to be going further and further back as people's expectations and the challenges seem to be rising. So that, for me, is a perfect storm where in the work that I've done internationally, what you saw was that if in an African country that people didn't have satellite television and they couldn't get it for whatever reason, or they couldn't communicate easily as they could when they would go to London, everything skipped from landlines and telephones to cell phones.
Right. That
That is what's happening right now in politics. We're about to skip a generation of whatever it is we thought was going to happen in terms of direct participation. AmericansElect.org is an example of that. What No Labels is doing is an example of that. Ruckus is an example of that. And we're going to go light years forward. And the leaders who don't embrace that and understand that that's a part of their narrative of leading right now are going to be left behind. It won't just be the primary. It'll be that people are going to do what has been in effect nationwide antitrust measures, putting leadership in place because people want to be directly involved and responsible in what happens in their lives and in the country.
Right. I'm going to get into to remedies in a moment, but before we do, Michael, you and Andrew both kind of in our interviews, we talked a little bit about the clip that we saw and the way people were talking about social media. And Kahlil just talked about how technology has kind of created our situation in the sense that it's helped empower us, and that technology has given us a new set of expectations and a new sense of what we think is possible. And as a derivative of that, we've now been able to think that, maybe we can do better with our democracy. Michael, let's start with you, and then Andrew, if you have anything to add. Is there another side to technology in how it's created our current environment and the current sense of polarization and the things that turn us off about politics?
Sure. I'll quote from, or not quote, but reference a few words from two of my friends, Eli Pariser, who wrote the book The Filter Bubble, and Clay Johnson, who wrote The Information Diet. And in particular, what Eli wrote in The Filter Bubble. It's a really interesting read if you haven't read it. But basically, if you go to Google right now, so say this gentleman here in the front row went to Google right now, and you went to Google right now, and you both searched for the same thing, your results would be entirely different. You would see completely different things than you would. And this is because Google monitors what you click on, what you do when you search, and also because, say, for example, even if you're not signed into Gmail, but assume you're signed into Gmail, it would also then identify what your friends click on when they search on Google. Now let's take that context into Facebook. Facebook wants to give you a very relevant experience in your newsfeed. So you might notice that the newsfeed's gotten more interesting. That's because they're starting to learn more about what you click on and what your friends click on, and then they take content that you aren't clicking on and they move that away. They take that out of your view. So all of a sudden you're in a filter bubble where all the information you're seeing is confirming your ideology, is confirming your viewpoints. You're a Democrat, you're only seeing information from your friends who are Democrats. You read certain publications, you're only seeing content from those publications. And you get to this point where you begin to ignore the opposition and think of them as having completely different, insane ideas that are not even worth your time or attention. So I think in a certain respect, technology, to give you an example of where it's detrimental, is preventing us from getting the information that we can now so easily get if we really, now we have to look for it. So that's just one example worth mentioning where we have to be careful and not let technology provide us with this optimized experience that in doing so removes a certain point of view from our viewpoint, vantage point.
When movable type was invented, people were afraid that the printing press would spread as many lies as it would truths, and we all heard the adage, don't believe everything you read. That's obviously happening on steroids because of the internet. I couldn't agree with Michael's explanation of the filter bubble, but let me add another component to this, which is speed. So I think everybody will agree here that political opinion is formed mostly by people talking to each other, and they do it in the most traditional places, around a dining table, at a coffee shop, at a VFW hall, in a park, at a market. And For decades, those conversations, particularly in the American political system, have formed consensus around particular candidates, and political parties and the candidates try to influence that dialogue. So John McCain's a maverick, or John Kerry's a flip-flopper, or Barack Obama's a Muslim, or any of the other myriad of slogans that are bombarding the American public. So, but to give you a sense of the speed, let me just quickly tell you a story about my then 82-year-old dad in 2007, who has voted in every single election, would never have gone to a rally or put a lawn sign on his lawn or put a bumper sticker on his car. But if he was sitting around a dining room table, he would certainly have, offered his political opinion if the subject had come up amongst his friends. And he calls me up and he says, "Hey, Andrew, I don't know how to use my email. I'm trying to send an email to like 15, 20 people at the same time, and I can only do it one at a time. Is there any way that you can help me?" Well, if any of you have ever tried to explain how to use your parents' computer to them over the phone, you know that that's not so easy. So I drove over to his house, showed him how to use his address book, and then eventually I said to him, "So show me the email that you want to send to this group." And the subject line is, "Watch this." And my dad's sending around a Barack Obama YouTube video to 50 of his friends. And all of a sudden I realized that my dad had become a 21st century political pamphleteer and didn't even know it. And in fact was reaching the same 50 people that it would have taken him a year and a half to reach the old-fashioned way, and only if the subject of politics was to come up. So what about all the people who actually do know how to use their address book or know how to use all the social media tools? And that was back in 2007, 2008. So we did a little study, and listen to this statistic. By the end of the 2008 campaign, there were 1.5 billion views of online video that mentioned Obama or McCain in the title. 9 out of 10 of those views, of all those video views, were of videos that were produced by citizens trying to influence each other. Only 1 out of 10 were produced by the campaigns themselves. Voter-generated media, the conversation that used to happen around a dining table is now, in this election, 4 years later, with all kinds of additional tools and more people online and mobile phones, is actually even exponentially larger. So it exacerbates the problem that Michael's referring to in terms of the filter bubble and us not actually understanding how data is being used by companies and political parties to influence us. But more importantly, it also offers an opportunity for changing the dialogue, which used to be dominated by the political parties or whoever had the most money. And so I hope we get a chance to talk a little bit about what happened in the most recent, Dan alluded to it earlier, the SOPA-PIPA battle or the Komen battle with Planned Parenthood or other events around the world, about how technology is allowing voices to connect, to organize themselves, and they're doing it without cash, which has been such a driver of politics for such a long time. That's another very important point to make, which is that the underpinning of our political system, cash, is becoming less and less valuable.
Let me ask one last question, then I want to open up for questions in the audience. And I'm going to start with Andrew and then let anyone else jump in because Andrew's on a roll. But to that question about SOPA, so we've talked about how technology has revolutionized our capabilities. We have all these tools that didn't exist before. SOPA is a great example of how social media was used in a very organic way, in a very swarm-type way to achieve change. At the same time, arguably the most impactful, if not that, the most talked about political movement of the last several years was Occupy Wall Street. They didn't do anything on the internet. They literally picked up their stuff and camped. Physically, they moved their stuff to a park, and they did that across the country. There wasn't a technology component to that. So my question, starting with Andrew and then down the panel, is there's clearly an appetite for an Arab Spring type movement among a lot of people here in America, but do we have the tools? Do people know what to do?
Well, when you say know what to do, I mean, I think that you have to understand that there's no such thing as a leader in this, and it's not a leaderless opportunity, it's a leaderful opportunity. And I ran into somebody a couple weeks ago who said to me, "Oh, Occupy Wall Street was a failure." I said, "A failure? Really? Why?" I mean, because they couldn't anoint anybody as the person or the organization that somehow championed it. But I think that the fact that the 99% meme is now part of the lexicon is a particularly interesting success for a bunch of people that were encamped in a number of different places. And by the way, as the winter is returning, are going to come back. To answer your question, I think that people will use whatever tools they can, and for whatever circumstances. In the SOPA situation, I think it's really important to point out that it's a lot easier to say no than it is to say yes. And getting people on the internet organized to stop something wasn't quite as hard of a reach as getting people to agree on what kind of legislation we should have for healthcare, or what kind of environmental policy we should have, or what kind of economic policy we should have. So it's a lot easier to say no than it is to say yes. But on the other hand, here in New York, when the New York Tech Meetup sent a note out to its members, 2,000 people showed up in front of Schumer's and Gillibrand's office with 3 days' notice. There wasn't a dime spent on that organizing. They basically used Twitter as the main vehicle to just get the word out. Schumer and Gillibrand had never seen that many people in front of their offices, and usually they know it's coming because the unions are bussing them in. Right. In this particular case, they didn't need to do that. So it had a little bit of a kind of a shocking effect. But the last point, and I'll quickly let my panelists talk, is that it was a little outsized because Congress is used to opening up the door and looking outside of the hallway and seeing the opponents and the proponents on any given bill passing each other, building coalitions and making deals, and exchanging, frankly, money on their way to getting a certain bill passed in Congress. Well, when Congress opened the door on the SOPA legislation, there wasn't any opponents. They only saw the proponents. 41 senators signed on as sponsors of that bill. And then one day they opened the door and they got punched in the face by an online tsunami. And now they're thinking, well, what the hell just happened? Well, they were obviously shocked, but it's the difference between being shocked when you know a punch is coming and when you don't know a punch is coming. And we shouldn't give too much credit to the internet for having simply stood up to SOPA. What it really needs to do, what the internet and the internet public needs to do, is figure out how to build a new fabric for democracy that doesn't just fix the old democracy, but creates the opportunity for an entirely new 21st century democracy.
Why don't we pause there, as much as I want to hear the rest of us panelists speak, just so we can get some questions, because we're in a little bit of time crunch. So let's open it up to the audience. Anyone who's got any questions for our esteemed panel? Looks like there's a race.
Oh,
no, it's going to be Christ.
Oh, actually, they have to come down to the...
Good afternoon, gentlemen. And this question is for Mr. Byrd. And Americans-elect deserves a lot of props for innovating presidential primaries and breaking a lot of ground with technology through the online nominating convention. And so citizens are engaging this group, being able to submit resolutions and being to nominate candidates. And so that's traditionally the function of a party. So would it be fair to say that Citizens Elect is an exciting and new third party?
That's a question we got, actually, that was settled a long time ago. Actually, it's been more powerful for us to allow Democrats, Republicans, and independents to drive the issues to the top, and also to support the candidates they run regardless of party, and lay out a second process, a second pathway for people to run. I think, so we are firmly a nominating process that hopefully is looking toward the future and reimagining the way we do this antiquated system. It's a process argument, which isn't always the most interesting one, but it's been effective. And I guess I did want to add one paragraph, which goes to the last point. When you think a lot about brand. There's an Americans Elect brand, and you lay out tools like Facebook, and we have an Americans Elect Facebook site, and you struggle only for a minute with whether or not you should allow your volunteers to set up their own Facebook sites. You have this conversation, should we do it? And then you realize you don't have control over it because they're going to do it anyway. Our organizing principle is pick a president, not a party. That's the slogan, that's the idea that drives people. And as they lay out that particular idea, what they have done is taught our organization more about how to effectively use their relationships and networks on Facebook than we could have ever taught them. And what we do is we lay out very organized pathways of what they should do and how they should do it. But what is much more exciting is the fact that candidates, individual voters, and groups who have come together at Americans Elect are actually redesigning the way we engage in politics. And we know that since it looks completely different in 2012 than it did in 2008, that in 2014 and 16, when we have down ballot people running, not just presidential candidates, that it'll be a completely different world in a positive way. So thank you for the question.
Kahlil, it looked like your website actually uses range voting to find the topics of, through the colors. But what voting method, of all the voting methods possible, do you use actually to pick choose the candidate or candidates who are going to run for the primary? And what voting method do you use then to score or to vote in the primary for your one candidate, your field?
One of the things you had to do at AmericansElect.org is speak to a lot of different groups and individuals who know a lot about internet voting. And there's one thing we agree with them on strongly, and that is internet voting is not ready for general elections. That fixed day, trying to deploy that, the insecurity of the individual desktop. So what Americans Elect is a national caucus, which is secure, bank-level secure website. It is allows somebody to have a confidential ballot, but not private ballot. So we can go and ask you if what this piece of paper says about that was created about your vote, does that reflect what you actually meant? And it can be audited, and those three things mean that we can, for the first time, have a national caucus, which if there is a brownout in New York, it allows us to move it to the next day. So we have flexibility around the ability to deliver this, but also we have the security of understanding that it's one person, one vote, and that the intention of the people who do vote actually matches exactly what their expectations are.
So you're using single option plurality voting or majority?
Why don't we talk about it after,
Okay.
because I know that there are probably other questions that people want to add.
Yes.
I want to address the question to the person from Burson-Marsteller. If Mitt Romney called you this afternoon and said, how much money should I spend on social media for my campaign? What percentage of that would be on the amount of money that I have? And will it get rid of the other three, because we're all stumbling around while Barack Obama's popularity is rising because they're not really making a point? What would be your response, and how could you help Mitt Romney become the candidate with social media?
I'll tell two things. One, I would tell him to spend all of it or none of it, because I don't really want him to be president.
Well, then I'll run.
So for you, good question. A friend of some of ours, someone you may know, a guy named Chris Kelly, former chief privacy officer of Facebook, ran for Attorney General of California, came second out of 5, ran a really fantastic race, used a lot of his personal wealth that he made while working at Facebook to fund his campaign. Came to our office when I worked at Global Strategy Group for a focus group to go over some polls and things like that. And he said, Chief Privacy Officer of Facebook, I want to spend all of my money in the state of California on the internet. I'm going to win this election by putting everything online. I don't want to do any traditional media. And then we showed him the poll that said like the average primary Democratic voter in the state of California was like 69 years old, spent like 3% of their day on social media, spent an average of like 12 minutes a month on like Facebook, that sort of thing. And that was a big eye-opener for him. And I think something we acknowledge as political consultants is that TV, in most instances, is still really important. It's still the best way to get a big message out to a big group of people. That said, I'll say one other thing before I get to the point and the answer quickly. Diminishing marginal returns. There's going to be so much money spent on TV this cycle, there's going to come a point at which you can't spend another dollar and get an incremental boost. And campaigns have started to realize that they've raised so much money, the outside groups raised so much money, they're starting to think about the internet. They've started to come around and realize the internet can be more than a fundraising tool, which is the dirty little secret in that most political campaigns only use the internet because they think they can get small dollar donations out of it. So it's the case with Romney too. So what I would tell them is you should spend about 20% of your overall media spend online as a minimum. And that's what I've heard coming out of the Obama campaign is that is exactly what they intend to spend this election cycle as a minimum. That one, 2 out of every 10 or 1 out of every $5 should be spent online.
Thank you very much.
So I have one last question for our panelists, and I'm just going to we'll do one question to the whole panel and let them all answer. And we're actually going to key off something Michael just said, because Michael talked just a little bit about kind of the sad way that many campaigns use technology. And as Michael pointed out, they think that, all they can do is raise money off of it. Some campaigns are starting to learn they can persuade using this. But there's a tension in some regards between the idea of creating new tools, which are good for selling, good for a top-down type thing, and empowering people. There's a little bit of a tension there. With that in mind, and also keeping in mind that it was 2004 that Howard Dean taught us that we could all really raise money off the internet. It was 2008, whether it's fair or not, that everybody calls when Barack Obama decided or showed us we could use Twitter for politics. With all this as a background, just down the panel, we'll start with Andrew. Do you think is the technology that's going to most define the next presidential cycle and politics in the next couple of years?
So, big data. The Obama campaign, unfortunately, is no longer using the word we, which goes to the point that it's not just using the internet to raise money, it's actually using the internet to build community, of which money is a byproduct. And he did it very successfully in 2008, and unfortunately when he became president, started using the word I, and it's having a really hard time getting the we back into the campaign. So what they're doing is that they are using the most sophisticated data collection that you could imagine any Fortune 500 company marketing to anybody would use, which is they're collecting the voter files, they're searching the internet for publicly available information about you. Yes, you. And what you believe in, what you bought yesterday, so that if you buy 7th generation soap and recycled paper towels, you're getting direct pro-environmental messages from Barack Obama to that sophistication. So big data is going to be the battleground. The question is what happens to that data? Do they give it back to the voters when they're finished? No. The Obama administration just issued a whole set of opinions on with the FTC about data privacy. It'd be really interesting to see them also apply those same principles to themselves when they're running for president.
That's true. Like, the canned spam law, for example, and all these laws that apply to most commercial marketers do not apply to political candidates when they're running for office, which enables them to legally spam you. I agree with Andrew that the answer is data. I'll tell 2 things. One is, I'd say last election cycle, it was probably for the first time like the internet was the big difference, the big tool in and of itself. And that I spent a career trying to convince political candidates over a decade, you should launch a website before you announce for office. You should use social media. You should advertise when someone types your name into Google, an ad should come up. You should send emails to your supporters that don't just ask for money. Like the sort of basic, fundamental things of running a campaign that we now take as gospel. It took until the last election cycle before political candidates began to take the internet seriously. I think what we've seen now, exactly what Andrew said, is data. Now, 2 things I want to mention quickly. One is, it's nothing that direct mail consultants haven't been doing for 20 years, 30 years. So here, you can be all freaked out about how crazy targeting is on the internet, but just know that's how we've been targeting direct mail to voters for decades. And that we take commercial data, we take voter file data, we create models based on that, and we send you direct mail based on how we know you voted in the past, what you shop for, what you do online. The difference is, for the first time, we're taking that experience that exists in direct mail and we're now able to apply it to the internet. So for now, like when you're going to see an ad on the internet this election cycle from a candidate, you have to know that that ad was specifically selected and tailored for you. Your vote history, how you're registered, which organizations you donate to, which magazines you read, how many kids you have, how wealthy you are. That's all for the first time now jumped out of direct mail and is now on the internet.
So I guess I should just say data, but I'm not going to. But since I have the mic last, I'm going to try out a couple of concepts. At americaselect.org, we're we're allowing citizens to take party functions and put them in their hands, shaping the process, choosing candidates, selecting the rules that govern. But we can't change, and this is the first concept, political physics. Political physics are that you have to have a good candidate, good organization, you have to have some money, some, not as much as they say, but some, and you have to have a good message. So campaigns, it's incumbent upon them to do that. To answer the question directly, I'm going to try something out here. I think it may be something called political Moore's law. And that is, I think what you laid out, the 80-20 rule that you laid out is interesting. But really what it's all about is what's going to buy me that extra 2 or 3 points in Michigan that I need to win the primary? Or what's going to get someone to go from being a person who gives $25 to being a person who gives $200 over a year? The Moore's law part about it is that whatever the fastest, smartest political consultants choose and see and gravitate to, whatever they see is the most powerful driver of influence amongst individuals, and when they listen really hard to what these communities that gather as voters or organizers, whatever they're using, whether it is Facebook or some Google application, or Reddit or Tumblr or whatever, all these things that, quite honestly, they didn't exist in 2008, and I certainly didn't know what they were. I knew what Facebook was. But the ones who get to that space the furthest, the fastest, understand it the best, understand that the technology is going to change on them every 6 months or less, those are the people who are going to win campaigns. Those are the people who are going to influence the debate the most. So I think the most powerful tool is the brain and the consultant and the candidates who actually embrace this faster than their competition.
Thank you very much. It's interesting. We ended up kind of where we began. Kahlil kind of restated in some ways a point that Andrew made at the beginning, which is that for as much as things change, they really also stay the same. I want you to please join me in thanking our esteemed panel. This was a great discussion.